They laughed when she offered just $1 for the sick, defeated German Shepherd no one wanted. Some called her foolish, but when she knelt beside him and whispered, "You're worth saving," nobody imagined what would happen next. By the time the truth came out, everyone wished they'd acted differently. The auction yard smelled of old hay and hopelessness. Buyers moved from pen to pen, appraising the animals like worn-out tools, whispering about which ones might be worth a few dollars. At the far end of the row, a sickly German Shepherd lay on a splintered platform. His ribs jutted through his dull coat. A torn sign dangled above his head, printed in smudged ink. $1. Most people didn't bother to stop. Those who glanced his way quickly looked off again, uncomfortable under the weight of his quiet, vacant stare. To them, he was already gone. Just another burden no one wanted to carry. But one person did stop. She was young, barely more than a girl, with a braid tucked into her worn jacket and boots scuffed from too many long walks. She stood in front of the shepherd, her hands folded around the single coin in her pocket. His ears didn't twitch. He didn't lift his head. Yet something about the way she watched him made the auctioneer frown, as if he suspected she might be trouble. Around her, the crowd shuffled and murmured. A man to her left laughed under his breath. "Don't waste your time, miss," he called. "That one's as good as dead." But she didn't look away. She looked right into the dog's tired eyes and whispered, "You're not nothing to me." The auctioneer adjusted his hat, clearing his throat with a bored sigh. "All right," he barked, tapping the sign. $1 as is. Any takers?" No hands rose. A few people turned away, already eager to move on. The German Shepherd lay motionless, as if he couldn't bear to hope anyone would care. Then slowly, the girl raised her hand. Her fingers trembled, but her voice was clear. "I'll take him." A ripple of disbelief moved through the crowd. Someone snorted. "You serious?" "Save your money. He won't make it through the week." The auctioneer lifted an eyebrow. $1 then, he said almost mockingly. "You sure you want this one?" She stepped forward, uncurled her hand, and pressed a single silver coin into his palm. It looked so small against his weathered fingers, so insignificant for the price of a life. "I'm sure," she said. The auctioneer shrugged and pocketed the coin. "Suit yourself." She knelt beside the shepherd, close enough now to see the sores on his elbows, and the way his breath hitched with every exhale. Gently, she placed her hand on his head. His ears twitched at her touch, the first flicker of life anyone had seen in hours. "You're coming home with me," she whispered, "and no one will ever call you worthless again." Behind her, the crowd was already dispersing, but she didn't hear their muttered disbelief. All she saw was the way the dog finally slowly lifted his tired gaze to meet hers. The drive home felt longer than it was. The girl kept glancing into the back seat where the German Shepherd lay curled on an old blanket, too weak to lift his head. Every pothole made his breathing catch. Every turn a reminder of how fragile he'd become. When they arrived, she carried him inside in her arms. He was lighter than she'd imagined, like all the weight had drained out of him along with his hope. She laid him gently by the fireplace and wrapped him in another blanket, her heart aching at the way he shivered despite the warmth. The veterinarian came that evening, her face grave as she examined the dog's sunken flanks and brittle fur. "He's severely malnourished," she said softly. "Dehydrated, anemic, and heartbroken." The girl nodded, her jaw set. "But he's not gone yet." The vet hesitated, then handed her a bag of supplies. Syringes for fluids, high-calorie broth, antibiotics. "It will take everything you have," she warned, "and even then, he might not make it." After the vet left, friends and neighbors stopped by. Some shook their heads in pity. Others told her she was foolish to waste her time and money on a dog who'd never recover. But when the last person left, she knelt by his side. Carefully, she lifted the bowl of broth to his cracked lips. "It's okay," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheek. "You don't have to be strong alone anymore." And that night, she stayed up with him until dawn. Morning light slipped through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the blanket where the German Shepherd lay. The girl hadn't slept more than an hour, her head resting on her folded arms beside him. She woke to the tiniest shift of movement, just enough to make her sit up, heart thumping. He was trying to lift his head. It took all his strength, and his neck wobbled under the effort. But when he finally looked up, their eyes met, truly met, for the first time. In that fragile moment, she saw something flicker in the dull brown depths. A question. Am I really safe here? She swallowed, her throat thick. Yes, she whispered, reaching out to stroke the fur between his ears. You're safe. He laid his head back down, but his breathing was steadier now. When she offered the bowl of broth, he nudged it with his nose, then licked at it in tiny, tentative laps. Each hour that passed, he grew a little stronger. By evening, he managed to sit up for a moment on trembling legs before collapsing back against the blanket. She clapped her hands softly, praising him like he'd run a marathon. Neighbors peeked through the window, their doubtful expressions slowly giving way to something else. Wonder, maybe even shame. Because against every prediction, the dog was fighting to live. And the girl was right there with him, her hope as steady as the quiet promise she'd made in the auction yard. You're worth saving. Days turned into weeks. The girl kept the same routine, waking before dawn to prepare broth, coaxing him to eat, cleaning his wounds, and speaking to him as if he'd always belonged beside her fireplace. Each morning, he looked a little stronger. Each night, his eyes stayed open a little longer. One evening, she brushed his coat and felt something she hadn't noticed before. A thin line of raised skin along his side. A scar. Curious, she rummaged through the old papers the auctioneer had shoved into her hands. Buried at the bottom was a faded record. Her heart skipped. He'd once been a certified rescue dog. Injured during a building collapse, he'd been deemed unfit for duty and quietly discarded. She set the papers aside and looked at him, her throat tight. You weren't broken, she whispered. You were just abandoned. As if he understood, the German Shepherd lifted his head and rested it in her lap. For the first time, his tail gave a single, tentative wag. Word spread through town that the dying dog wasn't dying after all. People who'd once scoffed began stopping by the gate just to watch him standing on his own 4 feet. Some offered donations, others simply said they were sorry for doubting. But the girl didn't need their approval. She only needed the way he looked at her now, clear-eyed and certain, as if he finally believed he was home. And maybe for the first time he did. Months later, the same auction yard bustled with curious onlookers. Word had traveled fast about the girl and the dog she'd saved. This time people didn't pass her by with smirks or pity. They watched in quiet amazement as she walked toward the auctioneer with the German Shepherd at her side. He didn't look anything like the broken creature they'd all dismissed. His coat gleamed in the sunlight, thick and healthy. His head was high, ears pricked forward, every step measured with calm strength. When she stopped, he leaned gently against her leg as if to say, I'm not afraid anymore. The auctioneer's face went pale. That can't be the same dog, he murmured. She smiled and held up the old sign she'd kept folded in a drawer all this time. The one that read $1. For a moment, no one spoke. Then she turned to face the crowd. This is what $1 and a little faith can do, she said, her voice steady. You all called him worthless. You said he'd never matter, but he mattered to me. A hush fell over the yard. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others lowered their heads, unable to meet her gaze. Then slowly the German Shepherd stepped forward. He sat tall beside her, his eyes sweeping the faces around him, not with fear but quiet forgiveness. And in that silence, everyone finally understood. Kindness doesn't measure worth in dollars. It sees the value no one else dares to see.